Hercule Poirot sat in his usual chair by the window, the dim light of the street lamps outside casting long shadows across his study. The quiet of the evening was broken only by the faint ticking of the clock on the mantelpiece, its rhythmic sound filling the silence as Poirot contemplated the case before him. It had begun like any other, a murder, a tragic loss, but as the hours passed and the investigation deepened, it became clear that this was not an ordinary crime. The victim, a well-known businessman named Edmund Hale, had been found dead in Fieschi. His study, a single stab wound to the heart, but with no signs of struggle, no bloodstains, and no clues left behind. It was as if the killer had vanished into thin air, leaving nothing to follow, no trace to unravel. Poirot's sharp mind had immediately started working, examining the scene, considering every angle and questioning every possibility. A murder with no clues was a rare phenomenon indeed, and one that intrigued Poirot to his core. It was a challenge unlike any other, a puzzle that seemed unsolvable, and yet, the more he thought about it, the more he realized that there had, too, be something he was missing. The answer, he was certain, was there, hidden in plain sight, just waiting to be uncovered. Captain Hastings, who had been sitting in a chair opposite Poirot, watched his friend with a mixture of admiration and concern. Hastings had known Poirot for years, and though he had witnessed the detective's remarkable ability to solve the most perplexing of cases, he could see that this one was affecting him more than usual. Poirot, always calm and collected, was now sitting with his fingers steepled, lost in thought, his face furrowed in concentration. "Poirot," Hastings said softly, breaking the silence. "I've seen you tackle some pretty difficult cases in the past, but this one feels different, doesn't it?" Poirot's gaze slowly lifted to meet Hastings' eyes, and for a moment there was a flicker of something unspoken, before his expression returned to its usual calm. "Indeed, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice steady but carrying a hint of frustration. "This case is unlike any other I have faced. There are no clues, no motive, no obvious suspects. The victim, Edmund Hale, had no enemies, at least none that we know of. His life seemed as spotless as a newly made bed. And yet, here he lies, dead, in his own study." Hastings frowned. "But Poirot, isn't that the most straightforward part of it? We know where he was. We know when it happened. There's got to be something. You've already examined the scene. We've spoken to everyone who was in the house." Poirot leaned forward slightly, his eyes narrowing as he sifted through the facts in his mind. "Yes, Hastings, that is true. And yet, there is something wrong. This murder was too clean, too perfect. It is as if the killer was not just trying to commit a crime, but to erase all evidence of having ever been there. No struggle, no trace of a weapon, nothing. It's almost as though the killer knew exactly how to manipulate the scene, how to leave no clues behind." Hastings looked at him, perplexed. "But Poirot, what could that mean? If the killers left no clues, how can we ever catch them?" Poirot's lips curled into a faint, almost imperceptible smile. "That, my dear Hastings, is the challenge. You see, when there are no clues left behind, one must start from the beginning. Look at what is there, not what isn't. The human mind is a remarkable thing. Sometimes it is what we overlook that tells us the most." Poirot stood up and walked to the window, gazing out into the street. "This is no ordinary case of passion or greed, Hastings. This is something deeper, a mind, highly calculating, that has gone to great lengths to make sure there is no trace left behind. But I do not believe it is as perfect as it seems. There are always details, always something that can be found. And when I find it, I will know the truth." As Poirot stood there, contemplating the case, his mind began to piece together fragments of the evening. The victim, Edmund Hale, had been alone at the time of the murder, and there had been no sign of forced entry into the study. The door had been locked from the inside, the windows shut tight. The only sound that had been heard was a faint scream, which was quickly silenced. And yet, despite the lack of physical evidence, there was one thing that Poirot could not ignore: the feeling that this crime was not as clean as it appeared.